My name is Emily. The night my roof tore away in a tornado, I begged my own father to save us, and he chose a picnic instead. He told me we're at the park with your sister and the kids, sorry, as the sirens screamed. That was the moment I realized. If they could leave me to die, I could leave them behind and make sure they'd never forget it. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The first warning came as a sharp tone over the radio. I had just gotten Ava to nap in her pajamas when the broadcaster's voice cut through the static. A tornado warning is now in effect for Clay County. Residents should seek shelter immediately. My hands went cold. I fumbled for my phone and dialed my father. It rang twice. Dad! I could hear laughter and the distant screech of children playing. My car won't start. I'm stuck at the house and they just issued a tornado warning. Can you please come get me an Ava, please? There was a pause, then he sighed. We're at the park with your sister and the kids. It's kind of a big family day. Can't you call roadside? I blinked. Dad, there's no time. It's a tornado warning. The sirens are going off. Another sigh. Emily, if we pack everyone up now, it'll be too chaotic. Just go to your basement. You'll be fine. My voice cracked. I'm scared. A beat passed. Sorry, hun. We've got our hands full here. Let us know you're okay. Then he hung up. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the blank screen in my hand. Ava's tiny voice called from the other room, sleepy and confused. Mommy! My legs finally moved. I scooped her up, heart hammering, and bolted to the basement stairs. The wind outside had taken on that awful, unearthly howl, a freight train that never stops. I grabbed the old quilt from the couch and pulled Ava beneath it with me, our backs pressed against the cold concrete wall. Her little fingers clung to mine. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. I've got you. The house groaned above us, then something snapped loud, like a tree limb splitting in half. I felt the foundation shudder. Ava buried her face in my chest and sobbed. In the dark, my phone screen lit up with another emergency alert. I didn't even have the strength to read it. I just held her tighter and whispered over and over, We're okay. We're okay. We're okay. But we weren't. Because in that moment, huddled under a blanket, praying our ceiling wouldn't cave in, I knew something more terrifying than the storm had happened. I had been abandoned. Not just ignored. Not just brushed off. Abandoned in the most literal, primal sense. By the people who gave me life. By the man who used to lift me onto his shoulders at fireworks shows and swear he'd always keep me safe. Ava's breathing slowed as she fell into an exhausted sleep, but I couldn't rest. I stared at the cracked ceiling above us, feeling the wind roar and the rafters moan. Outside, our world was being ripped apart. Inside, so was I, and something else was beginning to form, not just grief or shock or fear, something colder, sharper. What would you do if the people you trusted most showed you exactly where you stood? Because the next morning, when I knocked on their front door, soaked and shaking, they handed me a tent. That's when I knew this wasn't just about surviving the storm. It was about surviving them. The sky the next morning was deceptively clear. Pale blue, wisps of cotton clouds drifting past like nothing had happened. But the house we crawled out of it looked like a war zone. The roof was partially gone. Shingles scattered across the yard like discarded cards. A tree had split down the middle and crushed my neighbor's fence. I stood there, still clutching Ava's hand, in one of the few dry spots of carpet we had left, staring at the hole above our living room couch. We had survived by inches. With one borrowed coat wrapped around Ava and another over my shoulders, we started walking. 2 buses and a half-mile later, I stood on my parents' doorstep. Their pristine beige house stood untouched by the storm. Perfect hedges. Wind chimes still dangling cheerily by the porch. My sister's SUV was in the driveway. I could hear a blender running inside. Someone was making smoothies. I knocked. My father opened the door wearing a fleece pullover and holding a coffee cup like it was just another Saturday morning. Emily, his brow furrowed like I'd startled him. What are you doing here? I glanced down at Ava, mud still on her sneakers, hair a mess of tangles. My own hands were trembling with cold. The house, it's not livable, I said, forcing the words out. We just need a place for a few days, just until I can figure out where to go. He hesitated. Well, the thing is. Behind him, I saw my sister Natalie wrangling her twin boys into the den. They were squealing, laughing, chasing each other around the ottoman. "We've got the kids here," he said finally with a tight smile. "It's a little crowded." My heart sank. "You have 3 spare bedrooms." He rubbed the back of his neck. "We promised the twins the guest room. Natalie's been going through a lot with the divorce. We slept in the basement while the ceiling fell in," I said quietly. "Ava hasn't eaten. I just need 1 room." Something shifted in his face, not guilt, annoyance. He disappeared for a moment and returned holding something large and green, a rolled-up tent. He let it fall with a thud at my feet. "You can pitch this in the backyard," he said like he was offering me a prize. "It's waterproof. You'll be fine for a couple nights." I didn't move, my breath caught. Ava looked up at me with wide, confused eyes. "Are we camping?" she whispered. My father crouched and patted her shoulder. "Just like an adventure, sweetheart." I wanted to scream, to grab the tent and hurl it back through the doorway, but I didn't. I reached for Ava's hand instead. It was trembling. "We'll manage," I said. As I turned away, he added like an afterthought, "There's an extension cord in the shed if you need light." We walked down the driveway as the door clicked shut behind us. The cold air whipped around my legs. I heard Natalie's laugh float out through the window. Then the blender again. Ava clutched my fingers tighter. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" I bent down and kissed her forehead. "No, baby, we're just not where we belong." We kept walking. Each step away from that house felt like peeling off a layer of something I'd been dragging behind me for years. Shame, obligation, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this time they'd do the right thing. I had finally run out of maybes. I didn't cry until we reached the corner gas station. We ducked inside to warm up, and Ava curled into my lap on a plastic bench near the restroom door. A woman refilling the coffee machine glanced over once, then looked away. That's when I broke. Not loud, not messy, just tears slipping silently down as I held Ava close and breathed her in. She smelled like smoke and rain. This was our low point, but I didn't know yet. We were about to find something better than shelter. We were about to find someone who still believed in us. And someone who would help me realize that what my parents had done wasn't just neglect, it was spite. We made it to Lisa's place just before sunset. Her little blue house sat at the end of a quiet street lined with cracked sidewalks and fading fall leaves. The kind of place that didn't pretend to be perfect, but always made you feel welcome. I hadn't even texted her first. I think part of me worried she'd say no, or worse, say yes out of pity. But when Ava started shivering again, I knew I had no choice but to try. I rang the bell. The porch light flickered on. Then came the sound of footsteps. The door opened, and there she was, Lisa Reynolds, my best friend since junior high, standing in yoga pants and a paint-splattered hoodie, holding a bowl of cookie dough. She blinked once. Then her expression softened. "Emily." Her eyes dropped to Ava, then to the coat wrapped around her. "Oh, honey." I didn't even get a word out. Lisa pulled me inside with one arm, setting the bowl down with the other. "Come in. Get warm. Ava, you want to help me bake cookies?" Ava nodded slowly, eyes wide. While Lisa led her to the kitchen, I stood just inside the front door, arms still clutching the empty coat around me like armor. It was warm in here. Smelled like cinnamon and chocolate. It was the first time in 2 days I felt safe. Once Ava was happily occupied, perched on a stool and pouring sprinkles onto a tray, Lisa turned to me with that familiar look. Not the fake concern people offer when they don't want your mess to touch their lives. The real look. "What happened?" I told her everything, or most of it, the call, the storm, the tent. When I got to the part about Ava asking if we were in trouble, my voice broke. Lisa didn't flinch. She just passed me a warm mug and waited. "They had 3 bedrooms," I whispered, staring into the steam. She shook her head slowly. "This wasn't about space." I looked up. "This was about spite, Em," she said, not unkindly. "They left you there because they could, and because your sister needed the spotlight again." I opened my mouth to object, to say maybe it wasn't that calculated. But then I remembered Natalie's SUV parked smug in the driveway, her boys bouncing on the guest room beds while my daughter asked if camping meant we'd done something wrong. I closed my mouth. Lisa leaned back against the counter. "You know what your biggest problem is?" "I have a list," I muttered. "You still expect them to change." Silence stretched between us. In the kitchen, Ava giggled at the cookie dough on her nose. And in that moment, I felt something shift. Lisa was right. I'd spent years bending backward for scraps, forgiving cold birthdays, dodged calls, their quiet disapproval over my messy life as a single mom. They didn't show up for Ava's preschool recital. They forgot my promotion last spring, but I made excuses. They're busy. It slipped their minds. They didn't mean it that way. Now, I was done making excuses. I looked at Ava, chattering happily to Lisa about frosting. I won't let her grow up thinking this is what family looks like, I said quietly. Lisa didn't smile. She just nodded, like she'd been waiting years to hear me say that. That night, Ava slept curled up in a soft guest bed, clutching a stuffed bunny Lisa's daughter had left behind during college. I sat awake in the hallway, my feet cold on the hardwood, staring at the text from my dad I'd received an hour ago. Glad you found somewhere to stay. Let us know when you want to pick up the tent. No apology, no shame, just the same dismissive tone he'd used since I was a teenager who asked too many questions. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed out one line, "They don't deserve to live in my walls." It didn't make sense right away, but the words kept circling my brain. The farmhouse. The old place out near the edge of town, the one Mom and Dad had lived in for years, always treating it like their legacy. But legally, it was mine. Left to me by my grandmother when she passed. They stayed there rent-free, said it was family property. Suddenly, the idea made perfect, brutal sense if they could hand me a tent. I closed the Notes app and opened the browser. Typed in, "Local real estate agent near me. Let's see how they liked a taste of the cold." The farmhouse sat on 2 acres of slightly sloped land, just past the old train tracks that split the town from the fields. It looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I just wasn't the same girl who used to swing from the tire in the oak tree out front. I hadn't been back since Grandma June's funeral, not even when my parents moved in. I let them have it, called it a kindness, said I didn't need it. In truth, I couldn't bear the memories back then. I was too busy trying to raise Ava, too busy surviving. But today, I wasn't here to mourn. I was here to take back what was mine. The office was small and smelled like fresh carpet and lemon cleaner. Behind the desk sat Jack Feldman, a realtor with a kind, weathered face and eyes that scanned like they'd seen everything at least once. "Miss Hastings," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Emily," I replied, gripping his hand tighter than I meant to. "I'd like to talk about selling a property, one I inherited from my grandmother." He nodded, motioning for me to sit. "Address," I told him. His eyebrows lifted. "The old Jennings farmhouse." "Yep. Your parents live there, right?" I hesitated. "They do, but legally it's mine." He didn't blink, just pulled out a folder and started flipping through a registry. I'd brought the paperwork, Grandma's will, the title, everything I'd filed away in a cabinet for years, telling myself it was just a backup. Funny how the backup becomes the lifeline. After a few quiet minutes, Jack leaned back. "Everything checks out. It's in your name. They're occupants with no legal claim." I nodded. "I want to sell it." He studied me for a moment. "Are you sure about this, if they're family?" "They left me and my daughter in a tornado," I said, my voice level. "Handed me a tent, I'm very sure." His eyes softened. "Fair enough." I signed the initial paperwork with fingers that shook, not from fear, but from something else. Release, maybe. Jack slid the documents into a folder. "This place could move fast. It's old, but there's history. People love that around here. You'll have buyers lined up once it's listed." "Good," I said. "I want them out as soon as possible." He hesitated. "You'll need to give them notice." "Legally, 30 days." I nodded. "That's fine. I'll write the letter myself." As I stood to leave, he walked me to the door. "They might push back," he said gently. "People like that usually do." I turned, steady now. "They don't get to treat me like a stranger and live like royalty in my inheritance. I don't owe them comfort anymore." He gave a small nod, and I could tell, somewhere in his life, he understood. Back at Lisa's house that night, I sat at her kitchen table with a yellow pad of paper and a pen. It was quiet. Ava was asleep upstairs, and the smell of baked apples still lingered in the air. My fingers hovered over the paper. How do you write a letter telling your own parents to get out? You don't, I realized. You write it to remind yourself who you are now. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Natalie, as you know, the farmhouse located at 174 Crescent Hill Drive was legally inherited by me through Grandma June's estate. You have occupied it rent-free since her passing. something I allowed without contest or condition. That arrangement is now ending. Effective immediately, I am initiating the process to sell the property. This letter serves as your 30-day notice to vacate the premises. You must be fully moved out by the 15th of next month. Failure to comply will result in legal eviction proceedings. I understand this may come as a shock. I am no longer in the business of cushioning consequences. Consider this a courtesy. You left me and your granddaughter to fend for ourselves during a life-threatening storm. You offered a tent instead of a room. You chose Natalie's comfort over our survival. That's not family. That's selfishness. We will no longer pay the price for your choices. Sincerely, Emily Hastings. When I was done, I folded it carefully and slid it into an envelope. Lisa appeared behind me and placed a hot cup of tea by my hand. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, sealing the flap. "I'm done being quiet," I said. The next morning, I drove to their mailbox and dropped it in myself. It felt almost ceremonial, watching it disappear into the metal mouth like a message sent straight into a firestorm. Let them read it at dinner, I thought. Let them choke on the entitlement. Let Natalie gasp and Dad fume and Mom wring her hands. Let them taste a little of the cold they once handed to us so casually. Because this time, I was the one holding the door. The letter had been in their mailbox less than 24 hours when the first blow landed. It came in the form of a text message from my sister Natalie, sharp, dramatic, and dripping with disbelief. "You wouldn't actually do this to your own family, right?" I didn't answer. Because yes, I would. I had. The envelope was gone. The clock had started ticking. Lisa and I were in the backyard hanging sheets on the line when my phone rang again. This time, Dad flashing across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway. The sound of his truck engine still made my stomach tighten. It's strange how, even after everything, one sound could still make me feel 10 years old and too small to argue. I stayed behind Lisa's screen door as he marched up the porch, red-faced and furious. He didn't knock. He pounded. Lisa emerged first, wiping her hands on a dish towel and stepping squarely between him and the front door like she'd been preparing for this moment her whole life. "Robert," she said, her voice even. "Where is she?" he demanded. Lisa tilted her head slightly. "In a safe place, unlike the basement she was left in during a tornado." "I came to talk to my daughter," he growled. Lisa folded her arms. "Then try the sidewalk. That's where tents go, remember?" I opened the door behind her just enough to be seen. My father's eyes locked on mine. There was a pause too long for comfort. I could almost see the war behind his eyes, not confusion, not regret, just the slow realization that I wasn't bluffing. "You really think you can just evict us?" he said finally. "It's not eviction," I replied. "It's a sale of my house." "You ungrateful little—" "Ah," Lisa cut in, stepping forward. "Watch the next word real carefully, Robert." He blinked at her. I stepped fully outside now. My hands were shaking slightly, but I didn't let them show. "You left us," I said. "You didn't even call to check if we made it through the storm." "You didn't ask for help," he snapped. "I begged," I said, "and you gave me a tent." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm's sirens had been. Even the wind seemed to stop and listen. "You want me to respect you like a landlord," he said finally, venom rising in his voice. "Fine, but remember something: once you sell that house, don't expect to be welcome here again." I nodded once. "I won't." He turned, face stiff, and stomped down the porch steps. Just before he reached the sidewalk, I called after him. "You might want to start packing. Tents are cheap this time of year." He froze. Lisa couldn't help herself. She chuckled low, shaking her head. "Go on now," she said, "before I decide to call the cops and report a trespasser." He drove off without another word. The tires squealed slightly as he turned onto the road. Inside, I sank onto Lisa's couch, adrenaline draining faster than I expected. "Did I just declare war?" I asked quietly. "No," she said, sitting beside me. "You just finally stopped losing one." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for standing my ground. But I did feel something else. Anticipation. I knew they wouldn't leave quietly. Knew they'd come back louder, meaner, clinging to entitlement like it was oxygen. But I had something now I hadn't before. Power. And the will to use it. Because this time, I wasn't going to cry over their silence. I was going to make sure they heard mine in the sound of the front door locking behind them for good. 3 days passed before I saw him again. This time, he didn't come alone. I was folding Ava's laundry when Lisa called up the stairs. "Emily, you've got company." I looked out the window. His truck was back, idling at the curb. And there he was, my father, standing at the front step like he owned every inch of this town. His face was red again, but now there was something else layered beneath the anger. Desperation. Lisa's husband, Derek, had just returned from base the night before. He was already outside, standing on the porch in jeans and a plain black t-shirt, his arms crossed over his chest like a warning label. "Afternoon," Derek said, voice low but firm. My father didn't flinch. "I need to speak with Emily." Derek didn't budge. "Then speak from the sidewalk." My dad's jaw clenched. "I'm not here to cause trouble." "Then stay right there and maybe you won't," Derek replied, unmoved. I stepped outside, slow and steady, heart hammering. Ava was napping upstairs. I made sure she wouldn't hear any of this. 30 days, I said calmly. "You're down to 27 now." "Emily," he said, spreading his hands like I was the unreasonable one. "Let's not turn this into a circus. It's your family." "Exactly," I said. "My family, my daughter, my decision." "Your mother is beside herself." I crossed my arms. "She wasn't beside herself when I was sobbing in a basement with her granddaughter." He didn't answer that. "I just think you're making a mistake," he said. "Kicking your own parents out." I smiled, and it wasn't a kind one. "You didn't see it as kicking someone out when you told me to camp in the backyard, did you?" His mouth opened, then shut again. Derek spoke up behind me, his voice still calm. "Time's up, Robert." He looked between us, frustration bubbling to the surface, but there was nothing left to say. No argument he could throw that would stick anymore. "You've changed," he muttered, turning back toward the truck. "You're right," I said. "I finally did." As the truck pulled away, Lisa came outside with a glass of lemonade like it was any other Tuesday afternoon. "Well," she said, handing it to me, "that went better than expected." I sipped slowly, the ice clinking against the glass. "He'll be back," I said. Lisa nodded. "And we'll still be here." That night, I sat at the kitchen table and made a checklist. Not just of things to pack or papers to file, but things I'd promised myself in quiet moments and never dared to say aloud. Don't shrink to make them comfortable. Let Ava see what strength looks like. Never accept silence where an apology belongs. And at the top of the page, underline twice, finish what you started. Because they weren't going to back down easily. But neither was I. The envelope came back unopened. I knew it had been delivered. I'd watched the mail carrier slip it into their box with her usual efficiency and drive off without a second glance. But 3 days later, it was back in my hands. Returned to sender. No note. No explanation, just their silence wrapped in smugness. "They think if they ignore it, it'll go away," Lisa said, watching me peel the tape off the flap again at her kitchen table. "They think I'll go away," I corrected, but I wasn't going anywhere. I called Jack, the realtor. "They're refusing to vacate." He didn't sound surprised. "You'll need to file for formal eviction." "And how long will that take?" "Couple weeks, depends on the court's docket." Ava was coloring on the floor nearby, oblivious. She looked up suddenly and said, "Can we go see the house with the creaky stairs again?" It took me a moment to realize she meant the farmhouse. "No, baby," I said gently. "Not yet." But soon. That afternoon, I drove back out there, not to confront them, but to prepare. I parked across the street and just watched. The blinds were closed. The porch swing still hung crooked from the last storm. My father's old grill sat rusting on the deck. I wasn't looking for signs of life. I was looking for signs of entitlement, and I found them. A brand new SUV parked in the driveway, Natalie's probably. Shopping bags visible through the back window. The kind of car payment that says, "We're not planning on leaving anytime soon." It was the final nudge I needed. The next morning, I walked into the local precinct with every document in hand. Grandma June's will, the title, the notices I'd already delivered. "I need help executing a legal eviction," I told the officer behind the desk. An hour later, I left with a stamped copy of the court order and a scheduled time. Friday, 9:00 a.m. 2 officers would meet me at the farmhouse. Lisa came with me that day. We didn't speak much on the drive, just the occasional glance exchanged as the familiar fields passed by our windows. At exactly 8:59, the patrol car rolled into the gravel driveway. 2 officers stepped out, one older and broad-shouldered, the other younger with kind eyes and a clipboard. "You ready?" the older one asked. I nodded once. He knocked, loud, measured. A pause. Then the door creaked open. My mother appeared first, wrapped in a robe like we'd interrupted her spa day. Behind her stood Natalie, holding one of the twins, her eyes wide. "What is this?" my mother demanded. "Court-ordered eviction," the officer said calmly. "You've been notified." "You can't be serious," Natalie snapped. "She's our daughter." "Then you should have treated her like one," Lisa muttered beside me. My father finally appeared, shirtless and scowling. "You're heartless," he said, pointing at me like I was the one trespassing. "This is your family." "No," I said, voice steady. "This is my property." He laughed bitterly. "What kind of daughter does this?" "The kind who remembers the tent," I replied. The officers gave them 15 minutes to begin packing essentials. I stood on the porch as they shuffled around inside, voices rising, doors slamming. I didn't look away. I couldn't, because every slammed drawer, every muttered curse, it all sounded like justice arriving one box at a time. When they finally stepped outside, my mother carrying a suitcase and Natalie with her kids in tow, my father stopped in the doorway. "You'll regret this," he said. I looked him straight in the eye. "Not as much as you'll regret tents in winter." Behind me, snow had just begun to fall. I thought the hard part was over. Watching them carry box after box down the porch steps, hearing my father's words spit like venom as snow dusted the yard, I thought that was the final storm. But some storms hide beneath the surface. It was the following Tuesday when Jack called. I was at the park with Ava, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching her laugh on the swing when my phone rang. His name lit up the screen and my stomach dropped instinctively. "Emily," he said. His voice was careful, too careful. "What's wrong?" "There's something we found during the buyer inspection," he said. "I didn't want to call until I was sure." My throat went dry. "What is it?" "There's a lien on the property," Jack said gently. "It was used as collateral for a second mortgage loan, almost $70,000. I froze. "No one told me that," I said. "I know, that's why I checked twice." He paused. "The documents were signed under your name." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I've never signed anything." "I believe you," Jack said quickly. "But Emily, your signature's on every page." I didn't hear much after that, just the blood in my ears. Just the sound of Ava's laughter behind me, impossibly distant. My parents, my own parents, they had forged my name. They had used the house as collateral, my house, and never told me. Just assumed I'd never look, that I'd never ask, that I'd keep playing the role of the grateful daughter while they chipped away at the walls around me. All those years I thought they were just cold. Turns out they were calculating. When I got back to Lisa's, I sat at her kitchen table in silence. She didn't speak, just poured tea and waited. I slid the documents across the table. Jack had emailed them and I'd printed them out, still warm from the tray. She read the pages slowly, then looked up at me. "They didn't just betray your heart," she said. "They stole from you." I nodded, numb. Then I whispered the question that had been gnawing at the back of my mind since the call. "Could I go to jail for this?" Lisa blinked. "Emily, I'm serious. What if the banks think I signed it? What if they come after me?" Lisa reached for her phone. "We're getting you a lawyer, now." An hour later, we were sitting across from Rachel Moore, a sharp-eyed attorney in her late 40s with a voice like polished steel. She read through the documents like she was decoding a crime scene, and in a way, she was. "This isn't just fraud," Rachel said. "It's identity theft. They forged your signature, likely used falsified verification, and leveraged the property without your consent. But the banks will go after whoever's legally responsible. And once we prove you didn't authorize this, that won't be you." She tapped the pages. "You're the victim here, Emily, and you have a solid case. We'll subpoena the notary records, pull financial statements, and start building." I stared at her. "You think we can win?" Rachel smiled, calm, confident. "I think we can make them wish they hadn't underestimated you." Something shifted then, deeper than anger. It was like stepping into armor I hadn't realized I'd been building all along. I didn't want revenge. Not anymore. I wanted truth. I wanted freedom. I wanted to make sure no one, not anyone, ever walked through my life again thinking they could leave wreckage behind and never be held accountable. They had built a mess in my name. Now they were going to clean it up in public, and I'd be standing right there, watching. I never imagined I'd spend a Tuesday afternoon in a lawyer's office practicing how to say, "My parents forged my name." But there I was, hands folded tightly in my lap, voice raw from repetition, as Rachel Moore coached me through my testimony like I was preparing for a stage. "Don't let emotion get in the way of facts," she said, scribbling notes as we went. "This isn't about tears, it's about truth." I nodded, swallowing hard. Lisa sat behind me for support, like a silent anchor. Every so often, she'd hand me a peppermint or a fresh tissue without a word. I'd never been to court before. Not as a plaintiff. Not as someone whose own family sat on the other side. That morning, I dressed slowly, choosing a navy blazer and flat shoes I hadn't worn since my job interview 5 years ago, not for their comfort. For what they represented, I was here to work. We arrived at the courthouse before the doors opened. Rachel met us at the steps, clutching a thick folder of exhibits. "They'll try to spin it," she warned. "Expect them to play the poor parents card, cry if they must, make you out to be the heartless daughter." I nodded once. I'd already played that role in their playbook. Let's see how they handled the truth this time. Inside, the room smelled like wood polish and nerves. They were already there. My mother in a pale pink sweater clutching tissues before the hearing even began. My sister sitting stiffly beside her, chin high. And my father, stone-faced and glaring at me like I'd betrayed him. We didn't speak. The judge was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone. As Rachel stood and began presenting the evidence, I kept my gaze locked on the table in front of me. Bank records, property documents, copies of my actual signature side by side with the forged one. The differences were obvious. Intentional. It didn't stop my heart from pounding every time one of their names was read aloud in connection to a crime. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, knees threatening to betray me. "Tell us what happened," Rachel prompted. I took a breath, then another, and I told them about the storm, the phone call, the refusal, the tent, the laughter from the house that wouldn't open its doors to a freezing child, and then how I discovered that while I was surviving, they were signing. "I didn't give consent," I said clearly. "I didn't even know about the loan." The judge studied me for a long moment, then asked a single question. "Why do you think your parents used your name?" I looked up, straight into her eyes. "Because they thought I'd never stand up to them." That was the moment. I felt it in the silence that followed. Even the court reporter paused before resuming her typing. My father's lawyer tried to object, to muddy the waters with tales of miscommunication and family misinterpretations. But Rachel was a wall. "Intent doesn't erase evidence," she snapped. When the judge recessed to review the documents, I finally exhaled. My hands were damp, my spine sore from holding myself so rigid. Lisa squeezed my shoulder from behind. "You were calm," she whispered. "You were brilliant." But I didn't feel brilliant. I felt gutted. Because no matter what the verdict was, the truth was out there now. On record, official, irrevocable, and once truth has a voice, it echoes whether the family wants to hear it or not. The judge returned with no fanfare, no dramatic entrance, no gavel slamming, just the quiet authority of someone who knew how much her words were about to matter. We all stood as she took her seat, her face unreadable. The courtroom air felt thick, like we were all breathing through cotton. I glanced at my parents across the aisle, my mother with red-rimmed eyes, Natalie biting her thumbnail, and my father stone. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, arms folded like he was above this whole charade. But he wasn't above the law, not anymore. The judge adjusted her glasses and began. "I've reviewed the evidence, including property records, loan applications, signature analysis, and the testimony provided by both the plaintiff and defendants." I don't think I blinked the entire time. "In my determination," she continued, "the plaintiff, Emily Hastings, was not informed of nor did she authorize the use of her identity in securing the loan against the inherited property. The documentation presented shows a clear pattern of deception." My heart began to race. And though family disputes often stir emotional complexity, this court must look at the facts. She paused, then delivered the words that would change everything. I hereby rule in favor of Miss Hastings. The loan acquired using forged documentation must be repaid by Robert and Helen Hastings in full. Furthermore, the court authorizes the continued sale of the property without obstruction from the defendants. My knees went weak. Lisa gripped my elbow before I could wobble, steady as ever. The judge looked up from her papers. This court finds sufficient cause for further legal investigation into the fraudulent loan process. Additional charges may follow pending review. The gavel came down. It didn't echo, but it felt like thunder. My parents didn't move. Natalie gasped, loudly, like she just realized this wasn't a bluff, it was real, that we weren't playing pretend courtroom like when we were kids. The bailiff dismissed us quietly and we filed out. Rachel walked beside me, all business. "I'll handle follow-up with the mortgage company," she said, flipping through her notes. "But for now, you're free to proceed with the sale. Clean title, clean conscience." "Thank you," I said, barely above a whisper. She paused, looked me in the eye. "You did this. You didn't just survive, you made it right." As we stepped onto the courthouse steps, the wind picked up. Cold, crisp, but not biting, just clean. Behind us, my father finally emerged, muttering under his breath, flanked by my mother, who was sobbing softly, mascara streaking her cheeks. I turned. They stopped. He looked at me, jaw working like he wanted to spit out something cruel, something final. Instead, he said the only thing he had left. "You'll regret this." I almost laughed. Instead, I smiled. "Not as much as you'll regret tents in winter." His eyes flared. And then, poetic, almost absurd in its timing, snowflakes began to fall, light at first, floating down in slow spirals, the same way they had the day I evicted them. But this time, they didn't fall on me. They fell on them. Lisa held the door open as I stepped into the warmth of her car, Ava waiting in the backseat with a juice box and a drawing she'd made of our future house. I looked back once more, at the family who had expected silence, obedience, gratitude in the face of cruelty. Instead, they got justice. And I got my name back. 2 weeks after the verdict, I stood outside the farmhouse for the last time. The sky was pale gray, soft with the promise of another snowstorm. I watched the new owners walk through the front gate, Madeline and Jordan Huxley, a couple in their 30s with calloused hands, big dreams, and no idea about the ghosts that used to haunt the porch swing. They didn't need to know. They saw potential, history. They weren't interested in using the house to prop themselves up while stepping on someone else's neck. They just wanted a home to raise their future kids in. And for the first time, I could let it go. Jack handed me the final paperwork with a satisfied nod. "You did it," he said. I glanced down at the documents, transfer of ownership, final disbursement. My name typed in sharp black ink, Emily Hastings, seller, a clean slate, no forged signatures, no one else's name trying to wear mine like a mask. "Feels weird," I admitted. "Good, but weird." Jack smiled kindly. "Weird is what healing feels like before you recognize it." We shook hands. I turned back toward the car, where Ava was waiting in her booster seat with her sketchbook in her lap. "Did you sell the creaky house?" she asked. I smiled. "We did. Can I draw our new one now?" "You better," I said. "It's a blank page." Later that afternoon, Lisa met me at the new place. A modest 2-bedroom ranch with slightly crooked shutters and a driveway barely wide enough for my new SUV. She and Derek pulled in behind us with a trailer of donated furniture, boxes of clothes, and one stubborn lamp I'd forgotten we'd even packed. The key clicked in the door like it had been waiting for us. Inside, the walls were off-white and bare. The carpet needed replacing, and the kitchen faucet still leaked a little. But it was warm. Ours. Paid for with hard decisions and quiet courage. Lisa set down a casserole on the kitchen counter like she always did, her version of a welcome mat. "I brought lasagna," she said, waving off my protests. "And snacks for Ava, and a bottle of something that claims to be champagne but was $5.99, so drink it fast." Derek grunted as he carried a dresser into the bedroom. "This house won't fall apart unless you want it to, unlike some." Ava ran through the hallway, trailing construction paper and crayons behind her. She stopped in front of her new bedroom door. "Is this mine?" she asked, wide-eyed. "All yours," I said, kneeling beside her. "You can paint it any color you want," she gasped. "Even purple. Especially purple." Her feet padded across the carpet like she couldn't believe it was real. Back in the living room, Lisa flopped onto the sofa with a sigh and popped the fake champagne with a squeaky pop. She handed me a paper cup and raised hers in the air. "To survival," she toasted. "No," I said. "To choosing more than survival." We clinked, and I swallowed down the sugary fizz. As night fell, Ava curled up in her new bed beneath her favorite pink blanket. Her face glowing under fairy lights Lisa helped string along the wall. She fell asleep in minutes. I stood in the doorway, watching her chest rise and fall with slow, peaceful breaths. She had no idea how close we came to never getting this, to staying silent, to camping outside the walls of love we were meant to be inside. I wouldn't let her grow up thinking that was normal. Back in the kitchen, I opened my journal for the first time in months. The pages were mostly blank. I wrote, December 17, new keys, new address, not broken anymore. I paused, then added, we made it out, and they can't rewrite this part. The porch light flickered once overhead, but I didn't mind. The place still needed work. But this time, every repair would build something I chose. A home without gaslighting, without cold shoulders or poisoned loyalty. A place where love wasn't a bargaining chip. Lisa reappeared in the doorway, holding a box labeled fragile, EMILY stuff. She grinned. "Want to unpack your past?" I shook my head. "Nah, let's start with the future." A full year passed. I marked the anniversary of the storm not with dread, but with something that looked a lot like peace. Ava had just started kindergarten, and our new routine felt so stable, so beautifully mundane, it almost felt unreal. Lunches packed the night before. Tiny shoes by the door. Sticky notes with affirmations taped to her backpack. "You're strong, you're safe, you're so loved." Not one of those words had ever been taped to my lunch growing up. But that was the point. I was building something different, something kinder. We hosted a small barbecue in our backyard to celebrate Ava's first week of school. Lisa brought over grilled corn and her famous honey-glazed wings. Derek manned the grill like it was a military mission. Their teenage son taught Ava how to kick a soccer ball without falling over. Laughter echoed across the fence lines. Real laughter. Not the brittle kind we used to fake at my parents' table during holiday dinners. My backyard had a fire pit now, a simple circle of stones we built ourselves. Ava loved tossing in dry leaves and pretending they were tiny letters to the stars. That night, as the embers glowed and the adults gathered with mugs of cider, I noticed a plain white envelope on the patio table. It had no return address, just my name. I opened it slowly, careful not to smear the ink. Inside was a single card. "Emily, you were right, you were brave, I was neither." Natalie, there was no apology, just acknowledgement. A whisper of regret from a sister who had once watched me beg through a phone while holding her kids in a warm, dry house. I read it twice. Then again, Lisa leaned over. "From them?" "Natalie," I said. "She didn't sign it like a sister, just a person." "That's all she gets to be now," Lisa replied. I nodded. I didn't cry because this wasn't closure. Closure requires both sides to meet in the middle. What she gave me was something smaller, still meaningful but not transformative. I stood up, walked over to the fire pit, and without a word dropped the card into the flames. It curled quickly, corner by corner, until it disappeared in a bright, brief flicker. Ava came up beside me. "Was that a bad letter?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just one that needed to go away." She leaned against me, warm and soft and full of questions I hoped she'd never have to ask. "You're not mad?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "Not mad, just done. Done hoping for the kind of parents who bring hot soup when your heat goes out. Done wondering why I was never enough for them to treat with care. Done reliving a version of my childhood where I try, over and over, to earn a love that should have been free." Ava tugged my hand. "Come sit by the fire." We curled up on the porch swing, blanket around us, watching the flames eat through the last of the wood. Derek and Lisa laughed in the distance. The neighborhood kids played flashlight tag in the darkening yard. This was family. Built, not inherited. Chosen, not imposed. And no storm, not the kind that shreds rooftops or the kind that tries to live in your DNA, could touch this now. The mail came late that day, maybe on purpose. I was lighting citronella candles for another backyard dinner when I heard the shuffle of footsteps at the front door. No knock, just a soft tap. When I opened it, no one was there. Only a small envelope on the mat. This one had handwriting I recognized instantly. My mother's. I stared at it for a long time. It was heavier than a letter should have been, like it had weight beyond paper. Backyard laughter floated through the air. Lisa's voice teasing Derek about burning the burgers, Ava's high giggle riding the breeze. I closed the door, the envelope still in my hand, and walked to the fire pit. The card inside was cream-colored. Classy, almost like a wedding invitation. Inside it read, "No matter what's happened, we'll always be your family. Hope you're well. Mom and Dad, no apology, no truth. No, we're sorry for the storm, for the tent, for the lies, for the way we made you beg." Just a thin attempt to fold over the past like it was a corner on a well-worn page. I sat there quietly, watching Ava kick a soccer ball across the grass. She'd made new friends in kindergarten, real ones. Kids with warm homes and parents who smiled with their eyes. She didn't ask about her grandparents anymore. She didn't need to. I looked at the card again, then reached for the fire pit tongs. The flames were steady now, low, ready. I dropped the card in without ceremony. It caught quickly. Ash fell like snow. Lisa walked over, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "That another piece of the past?" she asked, handing me one. "Final one, I think," I said. She clinked her glass gently against mine. "To letting go. To knowing better," I added. We watched Ava pretend to score a goal, arms thrown in the air like a champion. Her hair bounced, untamed and joyful. There was a time when I'd have given anything for my parents to love me the way I loved her. But now I understood something deeper. I didn't need them to love me anymore. I just needed to love myself enough to stop asking.